When Marley Reyes inherited her grandfather's run-down gas station, she expected back taxes, rusted pumps, and memories too heavy to carry. What she didn't expect was a sealed trapdoor, hidden beneath the service bay or the tunnel that led far beneath the earth. What she found at the end wasn't just shocking, it was enough to change her life forever. But with every gold bar came a piece of a past someone clearly wanted buried. Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from. We love seeing how far these stories travel. And if hidden history, mystery, and second chances are your thing, make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story might just top this one. The envelope was thick, yellowed at the edges, and tucked beneath a stack of overdue bills. Marley Reyes almost missed it. She'd been sorting through the mail with one hand, the other gripping a mug of coffee that had long since gone cold. When she saw the return address, Law Office of Carter and Bly, Glenmore County, her stomach tightened. She hadn't been back to Glenmore in nearly 20 years, not since her mother's funeral, and as far as she knew, there was nothing left for her there. Inside was a single-page letter, handwritten in uneven block print, like the pen had been held with shaking hands. The signature at the bottom was unmistakable: Everett Reyes. Her grandfather. A man she barely remembered except for the smell of gasoline on his clothes and the way he always seemed to be tinkering with something in the garage. He'd disappeared from her life after her mom died, like someone closing the last door to a part of her past she didn't want to reopen. "Marley," it began, "I'm sorry we lost time. If you're reading this, I'm gone. There's a place that belongs to you now, the old gas station on County Road 9. Don't sell it. Not yet. There's more to it than it looks. The key will help. You'll know when it's time. Everett." Taped to the bottom of the page was a brass key. No tag, no label. Old and oddly heavy, like it carried stories instead of just unlocking doors. Marley turned it over in her hand, a slow chill spreading across her chest. What kind of man leaves a mystery in his will? And why her? 3 days later, she was on the road, her rusted F-150 cutting through October fog on the highway out of Atlanta. The radio was off. Her thoughts were loud enough. She hadn't told anyone why she was leaving. Not her boss at the repair shop where she'd been barely scraping by. Not the landlord who'd been threatening eviction. Glenmore was a place she'd never planned to revisit, full of ghosts and gravel roads, and that worn-down version of herself she'd worked hard to leave behind. The gas station came into view just as the sun began to sink below the tree line. A squat, weathered building with 2 rusted pumps out front, and a faded sign that still read, "Gas, 25 cents. The windows were boarded. Weeds pushed up through the cracked pavement. But there it was, just like she remembered from long ago before everything broke. Marley parked the truck and stepped out, boots crunching over loose gravel. The wind carried the scent of pine and old rubber. As she stood in front of the shuttered station, that key heavy in her pocket, she felt something stir inside her, not nostalgia exactly. Something stranger. Like the air was waiting. She didn't know it yet, but the station wasn't just a relic. It was a vault, a puzzle, a memory machine. And underneath its cracked concrete skin, something had been waiting for decades, buried in darkness, sealed in silence, and now ready to be found. The town hadn't changed much. Glenmore was still a place of slow rust and slower gossip, where the only real landmarks were the grain silo, the Baptist church, and the old diner that hadn't updated its menu since the Carter administration. Marley drove through Main Street, like she was sneaking back into a dream she never finished. One lined with peeling paint, warped wood signs, and people who always seemed to know your full name, even if you didn't know theirs. She stopped at the diner, partly because she needed a bathroom, but mostly because the knot in her stomach had started to tighten, and the smell of coffee and bacon was the only thing strong enough to cut through it. As she pushed open the door, the bell overhead jingled sharp and sudden. A few heads turned. Conversations didn't stop, but they definitely shifted, An older man behind the counter blinked twice, then gave a cautious nod. "Marley Reyes?" he asked. His voice had that drawl that made even a question sound like a statement. "Ain't seen you in, what, 20 years?" Marley forced a smile. "Long time." The man wiped his hands on a rag that looked as old as the floor tiles. "You Everett's girl?" "I guess so." "Then I suppose you heard." "I got a letter," she said, "and a key." That made his eyebrows rise. He didn't ask to see it. He just nodded again, slower this time, and pointed to the coffee pot. "Grab a cup, if you want. On the house. Just be careful, out there. Your granddaddy was a good man, but he kept strange company. Stranger secrets." "What kind of secrets?" Marley asked. He shook his head. "Not my story to tell. But folks around here don't forget. Especially not what happened in '82. Marley frowned. "What happened in '82? The man looked like he was about to speak, then changed his mind. "You'll see soon enough." That night, she camped out in the back of the gas station, sleeping in a cot she'd thrown together, using an old tarp and some blankets from her truck. The building was cold, smelled like mildew and motor oil, and creaked every time the wind shifted. She couldn't shake the feeling that someone or something was watching. But each time she stepped outside, there was only silence and dark woods stretching past the broken road. Around midnight, Marley walked through the garage bay again, flashlight in hand. She swept it across the cracked floor, the broken shelving, the rusting air compressor in the corner. Then, she saw it a square outline in the concrete near the far wall. Barely visible, covered in grime. A hatch. She dropped to her knees, scraped away dirt, and there it was. A steel trapdoor with no handle, only a narrow keyhole, worn, ancient, and exactly the size of the brass key she'd brought from home. She didn't open it. Not yet. Instead, she sat there, heart pounding in her ears, staring at a door that shouldn't exist in a building no one had cared about for decades, left behind by a man she never really knew. And somehow, she already understood. This was just the beginning. Morning came in shades of gray, seeping through the boarded windows like it was reluctant to wake the place. Marley hadn't slept much. Every creak in the wood, every whisper of wind against the walls had kept her on edge. The key had never left her pocket. She'd curled around it in her sleep like a secret too fragile to leave unattended. By 7 a.m., she was on her knees in the garage again, scrub brush in one hand, flashlight in the other. She cleared the grime from the outline of the hatch with slow, steady strokes. The metal beneath was surprisingly intact, industrial, reinforced, with rivets around the edges and a thick keyhole dead center. She slid the key in. It stuck at first, then turned with a low, mechanical click that echoed through the stillness like a breath being held too long. Marley exhaled. She gripped the recessed handle that emerged and pulled. It took everything she had to lift it. Beneath the trapdoor, a narrow concrete shaft descended into darkness. There were metal rungs embedded in the wall, rusted but intact. The air that rose from the hole was cold, dry, and carried the faint scent of earth and old fuel. She hesitated. Then, as if propelled by something deeper than curiosity, she grabbed her flashlight, checked her boots, and climbed down. The tunnel below was no wider than an air duct, maybe 7 feet tall. It extended forward, perfectly straight, lined with poured concrete walls. The floor was surprisingly clean, no cobwebs, no debris, no evidence of animals or insects. Marley's breath fogged in the air. She could hear her own heart beating in the silence. As she walked, her flashlight flickered, then steadied. There were old incandescent bulbs mounted to the ceiling every few yards, each encased in glass cages. She spotted a switch box mounted to the wall near the ladder. On instinct, she flipped it. To her surprise, half the bulbs buzzed to life, bathing the tunnel in dim yellow light. She moved forward slowly, hand brushing the wall as she went. Faint markings lined the concrete symbols, numbers, some carved, Some burned in. One caught her attention. May 1982, OP 47. Beneath it, an arrow pointed forward. Another said, "Do not return without clearance." A chill ran through her spine. The tunnel turned slightly to the right and opened into a larger chamber, more bunker than basement. The walls were lined with metal shelving. Some were empty. Others held crates, wrapped in burlap and tied with old rope. There were faded military stencils on the wood. She stepped closer. One box had been cracked open long ago. Inside, gleaming softly under the flashlight's beam, was gold. Gold bars. At least 6, maybe more. Stacked tight and partially covered in newspaper from 1979 Spanish headlines, water-stained and brittle. Marley reached out and touched one. It was heavy, cold, real. She staggered back, breath catching in her throat. $8 million, maybe more. Just sitting in the basement of an abandoned gas station no one had touched in decades. But something wasn't right. This wasn't buried treasure. It was hidden. Carefully. Intentionally. And the deeper she looked, the more she realized. This wasn't just about wealth. It was about a secret someone once risked everything to protect. And now, that someone might not be gone. Marley stood frozen in the center of the room, her breath fogging under the flickering yellow light. The silence pressed in like weight. Every instinct in her body told her to go back up that ladder, close the hatch, and forget she ever saw any of this. But she didn't. She reached out again, her fingers brushing the edge of a second gold bar. Beneath it, something caught her eye. A strip of canvas, frayed and marked with ink. She pulled gently. It was a map, faded, torn at the edges, and clearly hand-drawn. Not just of Glenmore, but the land surrounding it highlighted with markings, trails, coordinates, a few buildings she didn't recognize. One spot was circled in red. Below it, a name. OP-47 Relay Bunker, 1.8 miles. She stared at it for a long moment. None of this made sense. She'd come to Glenmore expecting a crumbling gas station and a few memories. But this was something else. Something organized, hidden. It wasn't just about the gold anymore. It was about why it was there, and who had put it there in the first place. Marley moved deeper into the room. There were more crates stacked against the back wall. One was filled with sealed canisters, labeled in a language she didn't recognize. Another held files. Actual paper files wrapped in plastic and tied shut with string. She untied one and opened it carefully. Inside, photos, reports, pages stamped with government seals she couldn't identify. Spanish, German, even some in Arabic. It read like a record of something long buried. Something deliberately buried. Suddenly, the air shifted. A low creak echoed from the tunnel behind her, not the sound of settling concrete. A sound like movement. Marley killed her flashlight and held her breath. The light bulbs above her still buzzed faintly, but she listened, heart thundering in her ears. Footsteps? No. Silence again. She told herself it was just her nerves. Still, she backed away from the vault, retracing her steps down the long corridor, each footfall echoing louder than the last. The deeper she got into this place, the more it felt like stepping into someone else's unfinished story. Back at the ladder, she paused one last time, looked over her shoulder toward the glowing chamber she'd just left. The map was still clutched in her hand. The smell of old metal and dust clung to her skin. She climbed up slowly, sealing the hatch behind her. The key clicked back into place with a heavy finality. Upstairs, daylight had begun to push its way through the cracks in the boards. She leaned against the wall and slid to the floor, heart pounding, map on her knees, her back against the cold cinder block. This was more than treasure. This was history. The kind people vanished, trying to forget. And something told her someone might still be watching. Marley didn't sleep that night. She sat on the concrete floor of the station's office, map spread before her, a mechanic's lamp flickering overhead. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw that vault. The rows of gold, the sealed crates, the ghost of something bigger than herself, hanging in the stale underground air. The map was covered in faint lines and strange symbols. She traced the red-circled area over and over again. OP 47 Relay Bunker, 1.8 miles. She thought about the hatch, about the letter her grandfather left. "You'll know when it's time." Was this what he meant? Did he expect her to follow the map? To go deeper? By dawn, she had decided. She packed a flashlight, a folding knife, her phone, and a thermos of strong coffee, then followed the map's trail out behind the gas station, through the woods. The sun was just lifting over the treetops, mist curling between the pines. The path was rough, overgrown, but clear if you knew what to look for: snapped branches, rusted survey markers, a half-collapsed fence. An hour in, she reached it. A small concrete bunker, half sunken into the hillside, almost invisible beneath vines and moss. The rusted steel door was padlocked, but someone had cut through the chain long ago. She pushed it open. Inside was a narrow hallway lined with shelves. Empty now. The floor was thick with dust. Light poured in from a collapsed vent above. Marley moved carefully, step by step, deeper into the structure. The air was stale but not foul, the kind of stillness you only find in forgotten places. At the end of the hallway, a metal door stood ajar. She stepped inside and froze. The room was different, clean, in places, as if someone had been here not long ago. A folding table stood in the center, stacked with documents, a couple of ration packs, and a lantern that still held the faint scent of burned oil. The back wall was lined with crates, much like the ones beneath the gas station, only these had been opened and emptied. She approached the table and saw a photograph pinned beneath a paperweight. Her grandfather, Marley Reyes, much younger, standing beside three other men in military uniforms that bore no recognizable insignia. On the back, OP 47 vertical bar Venezuela vertical bar 1981. There were other items too, a worn leather notebook filled with coded entries, field notes, a hand-drawn layout of the Glenmore tunnel system. One phrase was circled again and again. "The cache must stay hidden until it's safe." Marley sat back on her heels, stunned. Whatever this operation was, it wasn't just local. It was global, covert. Her grandfather hadn't just stumbled into a stash of wartime gold, he'd helped hide it. And not out of greed. It was protection, preservation, possibly resistance. Then she heard it, the unmistakable crunch of gravel behind her. Someone was outside the bunker. She snatched the notebook and photograph, doused the lantern, and slipped into the shadows. Her heart pounded in her ears. Boots echoed near the entry. Two voices, low, tense, not local. She didn't wait to hear more. Marley crept to the vent shaft, pulled herself up into the fading morning light, and ran the forest, swallowing her footsteps, as fast as they fell. Marley didn't stop running until she saw the outline of the gas station through the trees. Her lungs burned, legs trembling, but her grip on the notebook never loosened. She slammed the service bay door shut behind her, slid the heavy latch, and leaned back against it, heart hammering like a jackhammer against her ribs. She hadn't imagined it. There were people at that bunker, strangers who had nothing to do with Glenmore, nothing to do with her, and they were searching for something. Her something. Inside the office, she dumped the contents of the notebook across the desk. The pages were coded, most of it gibberish, but here and there she caught fragments. Hold until safe. Contingency 47 amperes. Eagle route shutdown. Military shorthand, encrypted initials, and pages of coordinates. She flipped to the photograph again, her grandfather, in uniform, expression grim. This wasn't some coincidence. He'd been part of whatever this was, part of something big enough to bury in both concrete and silence. But why leave it to her? She remembered him, vaguely, from when she was little, a quiet man who always seemed too tired for words, but too kind for fear. He'd take her for root beers on Fridays and teach her how to hold a socket wrench properly. Nothing about him screamed spy or smuggler. But maybe the weight he'd carried wasn't from age. Maybe it was from gold. Marley opened her laptop and started digging. Operation 47. No official record. She tried forums, old intelligence leaks, obscure PDFs. After nearly an hour, she found a name in a declassified CIA appendix from 1991 OP-47 Suspected Non-Combatant Asset Concealment Project, Venezuela-Colombia border, late Cold War era. Redacted under national security exemption. Whatever it was, it had never been meant to see the light. The doorbell chimed. Marley jumped. No one used the front door. She peeked through the curtain, an old Jeep Wrangler, mud-caked, parked outside. A man stood beside it. Mid-60 seconds, long gray hair pulled into a low ponytail, leather jacket faded from sun and time. He didn't knock again. She opened the door an inch. "We're closed," he gave a half smile. "You're Everett's girl. Who's asking?" "Who's asking? My name's Alden Fox. I served with your grandfather. And I know what you found." Every nerve in Marley's body tensed. "You should leave." He didn't move. "He left it for you for a reason. I don't want it. I'm here to help." She stared at him. His eyes didn't blink. "Help with what?" she asked quietly. "With deciding what to do next," Alden said, voice low. "Because what you've got in that basement, it's not just gold, it's leverage. And there are people who'll do worse than chase you through the woods if they think you're a loose end." He reached into his coat, slowly, and pulled out a folded envelope. "I made a promise to Everett. If the station opened again, and it was you inside, I was supposed to give you this." She took it, hands trembling, and watched him walk back to his Jeep. Inside the envelope was another letter, written in her grandfather's hand. "Marley, if you're reading this, it means I ran out of time. But you still have it. The gold was never mine. It belonged to the forgotten. I only held it. You have a choice now. You can hide it. You can sell it. Or you can finish what we started. Just know, not everyone who asks for your trust deserves it. But some do." Everett. Marley stared at the words until they blurred. The gold in the basement had been waiting. But now, it was her move. The sun was long gone by the time Marley emerged from the office, Everett's second letter still clutched in her hands. The gas station creaked in the cold night air, every shadow stretching longer than it should. She moved with purpose now to the service bay, down the ladder, back into the vault she hadn't visited since finding the map. This time, she wasn't just looking, she was preparing. The gold was still there, untouched, at least for now. But she knew better than to believe it would stay that way. Whoever those men were at the bunker, they hadn't stumbled across it by accident. They were searching, following the same breadcrumbs she was. The difference? They likely weren't following a legacy. They were following money. She didn't sleep that night. Again. She sat up, organizing the files, photographing the documents, translating what she could. One envelope had a stamped seal she recognized from online research. Banco Central de Venezuela. A deposit record. The date? 1,980. The amount? Blank. The name? Blacked out with thick ink. In the morning, Marley stepped outside to the sharp smell of pine and frost and spotted it. A dark SUV parked just down the road. It hadn't been there the day before. She stood still for a moment, then turned and walked back inside slowly, deliberately. She didn't want to show fear, but her heart thundered. She drew the curtains, checked the back doors, looked for signs of anything moved or tampered with. Then she found it barely noticeable. A footprint. In the dust by the trap door. Not hers. Too large. Someone had been inside. She checked the padlock she'd installed over the hatch, untouched. But the feeling remained. She was no longer alone in this place. By noon, Alden returned. This time, she let him in. He sat across from her in the garage's office, sipping burnt coffee, staring at the photograph of Everett and the others in uniform. His eyes were unreadable. "Operation 47, Marley said, quietly. Alden nodded once. "It was never supposed to last this long." "What was it really?" "A stash and hold," he said. "When everything in Venezuela went sideways in '81, a handful of us were pulled from regular duty and asked to do something off the books. Reel off. Secure assets until a government in exile could reclaim them. Not money, not jewels, gold, billions worth." Marley stared. "Why Glenmore? Because no one would think to look here. Everett owned the land. He built the tunnel. He knew how to keep secrets. But why me?" Alden exhaled. "Because he didn't trust anyone else. Most of the men in that photo are dead. The rest, well, some still want their cut. Others want it all." She looked out the window toward the SUV. "Are they watching me now?" "Almost definitely," he said. "But they won't move yet. They're waiting to see what you'll do. Sell it. Move it. Bury it again. But you've got one advantage they don't." "What's that?" "You're not after the money," he said. "You're after the truth." Marley didn't respond, because he was right. The next morning, Marley woke to a knock not at the door, but at the side window of the office. She sat up fast, heart jolting, her grandfather's envelope still open on the desk beside her. Standing just outside, silhouetted against the overcast sky, was a woman in her 70s, hair coiled into a neat bun, a cane in one hand, and a canvas bag slung over her shoulder. When Marley opened the door, the woman offered a warm but cautious smile. "You must be Everett's granddaughter. Whatever the never things, whatever Minable, I am." "Who are you?" "Name's Dr. Lucinda Barron. I knew your grandfather from a long time ago. May I come in?" Marley hesitated for only a moment before stepping aside. Lucinda moved with surprising grace for her age, eyes sharp, posture strong. She didn't look like someone you'd expect in a story like this, but then Marley was learning that nothing about this story followed expectations. "I've been watching the station," Lucinda said, setting her bag down. "Waiting. Everett told us if the hatch ever opened again, someone new would be called. I didn't expect it to be his blood." "Us?" Marley asked. "Who's us?" Lucinda reached into the bag and pulled out a folder. Inside were photographs, black and white, some aged and cracked, others more recent. Each showed different people, always in pairs or small groups, standing near unmarked buildings or inside bunkers, sometimes with visible crates behind them. One showed Everett, younger than Marley had ever seen him, standing beside Lucinda and a man she didn't recognize. "OP-47 wasn't just an operation," Lucinda said. "It was a network, quiet, global, built during the Cold War to protect assets that couldn't be accounted for on paper. Not just gold medicine, art, documents, tech prototypes. Each cache had a caretaker. Your grandfather was one of the last." Marley shook her head slowly. "Why would he get involved in something like that?" "Because he saw what happened when men with power used it to destroy instead of rebuild," Lucinda said. "He'd seen governments fall, civilians disappear, and he believed, deeply, that if something of value could be protected, could be used one day to rebuild rather than exploit, it was worth the risk." "His and Walker. And now?" Marley asked. "What am I supposed to do with it?" Lucinda reached over and opened Marley's laptop, sliding in a thumb drive. "It's all here," she said. "Names, locations, the rest of the network, the ones who remained, and the ones who turned." Marley stared at the screen as folders popped up. "Silent trust, remaining sites, known defectors. There are people watching you," Lucinda said, her voice gentler now. "Some will want to take what's in that tunnel. Others will want to kill what it represents." "Which are you?" Lucinda gave her a long look. "I'm the one who came to finish a promise Everett started. To protect the girl he believed could carry the torch." Outside, the wind picked up. A truck rolled by, slow, tinted windows. Inside, Marley stood with a thumb drive full of secrets, a basement full of gold, and the weight of a war she was only just beginning to understand. The gas station was no longer just hers. It had become something else entirely, a crossroads. Between past and future, between secrecy and truth, between greed and legacy. Marley stared at the files Lucinda had brought, still open on her laptop. Names, faces, some marked as unknown status, others labeled deceased, and one folder she kept returning to, KNO defectors. Inside were profiles of people who'd once been part of OP-47 men, who had turned, sold secrets, vanished. Men who might be watching her now. They're waiting, Lucinda said from the other side of the room. For you to make a move. Marley leaned back in her chair. So what if I walk away? Seal the hatch. Forget all of this? You won't, Lucinda replied. You're too much like him. That stung more than Marley expected. What if I gave it to the authorities? She asked. The government? Let them figure it out? Lucinda chuckled, not unkindly. You think they don't already know it's here? The ones you'd trust with it would be the first to disappear it. Marley stood and began to pace. So, what's the right move then? Just hold on to it? Let it rot while strangers circle the building and hope they don't break in one night with silencers and ambition? Lucinda didn't answer, because she already knew Marley was past the point of running. In the basement that night, Marley pulled the gold bars one by one from their crates. Some bore military seals. Others had symbols she didn't recognize, Latin inscriptions, worn crests, stamped serials. This wasn't just money. It was history, collateral, a record of power passed hand to hand through quiet wars. And she had it all. She thought of Everett, of the photograph in the bunker, of the letter he left with trembling hands and quiet hope. You can hide it. You can sell it. Or you can finish what we started. Alden returned just before midnight, his Jeep crunching over gravel, headlights dark. He stepped into the office, his face drawn. They made contact, he said. 3 of them. They're offering to buy it from you. Quietly. How much? Doesn't matter. That gold's not yours to sell. That's why Everett left it to you, not to a bank or a lawyer. He wanted someone with conscience, not price. Marley looked him straight in the eye. And if I tell them no, they'll try to take it. Her jaw clenched. Then she walked to the window, pulled back the curtain, and saw the SUV again. Parked closer this time. Lights off. Still. She turned to Alden. Then we give them something else. What? A reason to leave me alone. Alden frowned. What kind of reason? Marley didn't smile. We make it public. Alden froze. We leak pieces of it, she said. Not everything. Just enough. A photo. A file. A trail. We let them know I'm not holding this in secret. I'm holding it in trust. And if anything happens to me, the whole damn story goes wide. Alden's voice dropped. That's dangerous. So is waiting, she replied. But this way, I get to choose the terms. And in that moment, the girl who came to fix a broken gas station became something more. Not a mechanic, not a pawn, but a guardian. The press release went live at 6 a.m. Sharp. Just a single photo, grainy but undeniable. A gold bar stamped with a foreign seal, half wrapped in a 1979 Caracas newspaper, lying on the cold concrete floor of a forgotten tunnel. No names. No addresses. Just one line of text beneath it. If anything happens to me, the rest goes public. MR. Marley watched the email tracker tick upward. Downloads, views, shares. Within hours, it had made its way to 3 independent journalists, 1 international watchdog group, and a former intelligence officer who now hosted a podcast about Cold War secrets. Quiet ripples in deep water. By sunset, the SUV down the road was gone. Lucinda called it a win. Alden called it borrowed time. Marley didn't call it anything. She was too busy turning the gold into something better. She'd made a decision not to sell, not to vanish, not to hoard. Instead, she created a foundation under her grandfather's name, the Reyes Restoration Fund. She moved 5 bars discreetly, each through a different broker, using Lucinda's connections and Alden's silence. The rest stayed buried beneath the station, documented, sealed, and protected, not forgotten, but not flaunted. The money funded a new vocational program at the Glenmore High School, the kind Marley would have killed for at 17. Tools, classes, a space to learn not just auto repair, but integrity, independence, skill. It gave jobs to veterans, fixed broken roofs, paid off hospital bills, and still, no headlines, no front-page story, just quiet impact the way her grandfather would have wanted. One evening, as orange light bled through the workshop windows, Marley stood in the garage, watching a group of teenagers strip an old Chevy block. Leo, a lanky sophomore with burn marks on his knuckles, looked up and grinned. "Miss Reyes, this thing's got nothing left in it," she smiled. "Then we give it something new." Later, when everyone had gone home, Marley descended the ladder to the tunnel one last time. The air was still, like always. Dust floated in the light. The vault was exactly as she'd left it, shelves lined, sealed crates untouched. She walked to the center of the room and placed a small box on a low shelf inside it. A photo of Everett, the OP-47 patch, and a handwritten note of her own. "If you're reading this, you found what's left of something dangerous and beautiful. This wasn't a treasure. It was a responsibility. Protect it like it matters because it does. Marley Reyes." Then she locked the hatch behind her and sealed the floor with a new coat of concrete. The station reopened that spring as Reyes Auto and Trade, a mix of garage, school, and safe haven. Marley kept the sign rusty on purpose, just enough to remind her where it started. Sometimes, she still felt watched. Sometimes, strangers would come in, ask for directions, ask strange questions, stare too long at her hands or her eyes, but no one crossed the line again. Because now, Marley wasn't just a mechanic. She was a gatekeeper, and beneath the grease and grit and gravel, under the cracked bones of a ghost town's last gas station, $8 million in gold still waited. Not for profit, for purpose. And that was worth protecting.